Good day, everybody. My name is Lesser Catolico, and I'm discussing about terrestrial and aquatic biome. This is a topic for Science, Technology, and Society under the College of Business. I'll be discussing about this very important topic. Okay, so as you can see in our presentation this day, this is a very important topic regarding how we care for terrestrial and of course aquatic biome. We're talking about when we talk about terrestrial biomes, these are pertaining to life form or bodies of different types of land biomes or habitation. Also for aquatic biome, same. We're talking about uh, organisms who live in aquatic or sea or even in the marine ecosystem. Okay, let's move on to our first topic, our first uh, overview. This is the overview of our discussion for today. So we'll have Earth's major biome. We're talking about terrestrial. Of course, this one includes tundra and boreal forest, temperate and deciduous forest. We're also going to talk about grassland, chaparral, deserts, savanna, and of course, tropical rainforest. We're also going to discuss about vertical zonation. I will explain that term later. And of course, next will be aquatic ecosystem. For aquatic ecosystem, we will talk about freshwater and estuary freshwater and of course marine ecosystem. Okay. All right. So first is the Earth's major biome. So if we're talking about the word biome, biome per se is a word that relates to a soil or a vegetation or habitation of different plants, animals, and also some related to this one are the characteristics of this biome. So these are the large, relatively distinct terrestrial region that occupies, of course, we can find there some soil, different types of climate, of course, plants. We also have different types of animals, from the smallest to the biggest animal. Of course, besides all those different types of biomes. And yeah, so location of each biome is primarily determined by different form or characteristics. We're talking about temperature, of course. If it's on different types of biome, it requires, of course, different temperature. Okay, and of course, we are also going to talk about precipitation. So each of these different biomes, may be small or large or different types of biomes, they have temperature. Of course, it varies or it changes, and of course, precipitation. Okay. And also, according to this one, biomes can also be defined by, mean, also temperature and temperature changes, of course, fires, floods, and different form of biotic and abiotic factors that occupies or found on different biomes. Now here, on this slide, you can see the location or where you can find the different types of terrestrial ecosystem on the vast world. So you can see here it represents it represents different types of biome represents different types of color. Like here for tundra, you can see there in this distribution of this type of biome you can find there elsewhere. These are all yung mga blue colors. And here somewhere there, and of course on this area of the Africa, somewhere in the areas of the north and the south. Also in the Philippines, we have also this type of different types of biome. Also boreal forest, where it is presented by this color here, a little beige color. We have temperature, temperate deciduous forest and tropical rainforest. Also grassland. Grasslands are, I think, present everywhere except for those who are in the desert. Okay? And of course, we have the tropical rainforest, dry forests, and savanna, and of course, mountainous area here in the globe. Okay. Here, let's talk about vertical zonation. We're talking about vertical zonation. This one is a term where you can see if it is applied to like vegetation zone, where it is also defined by altitude. So when you go higher, course, the temperature changes and also the availability or presence of different animals also changes or it also varies. It's like when you're going up mountain hiking, of course, you can see there as you climb up the mountain, of course, there'll be temperature changes and whether it goes up or no or goes down. Usually, when you go higher, the temperature drops to a colder temperature, and of course, the organisms that live on these different types of zonation, of course, they also changes or they also varies. Okay, here is a very good example. This is a picture of very good illustration. So, so this is the a pyramid or a triangular form. So when you go higher, of course, the temperature goes colder. When you go down to the level of, let's say, on a water level, the temperature also changes, like from a colder temperature to a higher or lower temperature to a higher temperature. Also, the altitude increases, and of course, the availability of different species of plants, trees, and animals also changes. Okay, let's talk about terrestrial biome. Here, in our discussion, we will talk about different types of terrestrial biomes. We also talk about the different temperature, the characteristics, also the precipitation, and also the availability or what animals we can find on those different types of biome. Let's talk about the first one, tundra. Tundra, of course, according to our topic here, is a treeless. We talk about treeless biome. We seldom see trees present on this tundra area. So mostly are grass, or let's say there are presence of shrubs and different form of weeds on this treeless biome. We call it tundra. And of course, temperature it varies from a cold temperature during cold winters and a very hot or extremely hot summer. Precipitation, you can see there, we have 10 to 25 centimeter per year. So that's what the treeless or the tundra gets its precipitation from the environment. So showing different types of temperature also. We have a short growing season, about these days, 50 to 160 days. Here, for tundra, we have a very low species richness. When we talk about species richness, these are uh, availability of vegetation, let's say different types of grasses and sages, or called the shrubs. Of course, the food web here are very, very simple from a large, or let's say a very large predator down to its prey, and from smaller to uh, bigger animals present on this tundra. Of course, the productivity is very low because of there are less vegetation, and of course, if there are less vegetation, there are also less animals who rely on vegetation for food, so there will be low productivity. Okay, and of course, the soil here are poor in nutrients. So they have less nutrients in their soil. So animals who rely on soil for nutrients, of course, they're also lesser. And we're talking about permafrost. When we talk about permafrost, these are a permanent freezing or frozen area somewhere on this tundra. Maybe it is also present on higher elevation. So there are permanent frosting. Or we call it uh, permanent frozen ground. We call that permafrost. Next, we have the boreal forests. Here, in the boreal forests, of course, these are present on some presence, or you can find them on some northern hemisphere on the globe. It covers around 11% of Earth's land, and of course, we have also less precipitation, and it's a little longer than tundra compared to our discussion a while ago. So these are a little longer than the tundra when we talk about the season. Remember, tundra, we have a very cold winter and a very hot summer season. Okay. Now, for the boreal forest, of course, the soil are mostly acidic, and minerals are also poor. We have also vegetation, uh, only comprised to this type of vegetation. We have the conifers. So some example of conifers or trees are the white spruce. We have the balsam fir and of course the large here present on this boreal forest. So most animals here are small, like rodents or squirrel or some mammals. And also, we have also availability of some lizard, or we call them reptiles. And there are also a lot of migrating birds. When we talk about migrating birds, these are birds who are going out and in, or some are going out from the boreal forest if temperatures allows them to go out. And for some of them also migrates or goes inside the boreal forest. Also, there are also present of large animals here in our boreal forest. So mostly large animals are mostly carnivores. So they are found on top of the predator. Example of these animals are, of course, the different types of wolves. We have families of bear, and of course, moose. Mostly moose are some. These are actually the prey to some predator like bears and, of course, wolves. Okay. Next, we have the temperate rainforest. For the temperate rainforest, these are also found on some northern area or northwest area of the cold climate temperature or cold climate countries like in the US. So you can see there are high precipitation. There are also presence of fog or because of a very cold temperature. And of course, according to this one, we have very heavy winters. When we talk about heavy winter, there are a lot of presence of snow or yeah, winter or cold temperature. The temperature also changes from winters and of course summer. So their summer are not compared to summer in the Philippines. Summer in areas of temperate rainforests are even cool, even during summer season. Okay, so for soil, of course, they are also poor in nutrients. But according to this one, they are high in organic material. So organic material present in soil, these are actually what the some animals likes the organic material in soil. So if you can see a lot of organic material in soil, it could also be a lot of animals who rely on organic material. So they get there, they go there, they get their food, they get nourished by eating this organic material in the soil. Of course, we also have cool temperatures, and there will be if there are cool temperatures, the decomposition becomes very very slow. So let's say compared to hot area or hot temperature area, where the composition becomes faster compared to cold temperature. So what are the dominant vegetation here in tropical rainforest? We have large evergreen trees. Yeah, you can see there are very large, big logs and big trees present on this temperate rainforest. Also, so the trees grows older. So when they grow older, they become bigger, bigger. Of course, they have big logs there. These are the old growth forests. You have large evergreen trees. And of course, the temperature, it varies. So there are a variety of cool climate. There are also a lot of animals who stays on different cool climate. So there are a lot of animals here from the smallest to the biggest animal present on temperate rainforest. Okay, so next is temperate deciduous forest. Sorry for my screen. Maybe I'll have to put it down there. And so we have the temperate deciduous forest. This is an example of a forest where you can see the temperature is not that uh, not too hot and of course not too cold. Okay, it's called temperate deciduous forest. Okay, now yeah, let's move on. So for temperate deciduous forest, we have vegetation for present in this one. So the vegetations here are we call them deciduous. Because being deciduous, we're talking about a lot of different types of trees present on this type of forest. So we have the oak, we have the maple, we have the beech, we have also some coniferous trees that are also present on this temperate deciduous forest. And of course, for the animals, we have a lot of different types of animals from the from the large grazing animals like deer, bear, to the smallest animals like rodents, squirrels, and some other, small animals who stays on trees, who also rely on ground for some soil and for some organic material. So these are all present in this temperate deciduous forest. Okay, so most of this biome, according to this one, are of course they have been regenerated after farming. So after people who cut trees, they regenerate and then later return to become another form of forest. We call it temperature or temperate deciduous forest. And yan, topsoil is rich in organic material. Yeah, so there's a lot of organic material. Again, for organic material, if they are present in our soil, of course, animals likes organic material, especially those who are burrowing animals. Burrowing means they go deeper. They dig they dig their tunnels. They dig somewhere in the soil to get nourished by eating their organic material. Okay. Next is grassland. For grassland, it's very obvious naman. So grassland are land with grasses. So these are grassland with hot summer, sorry, hot summers and cold winter. So here you can see all tall grasses and prairies and also some short grasses. Of course, they start from small, later become tall. So these are all present in grassland. Next, we have, yeah, the soil has thick organic material, again, organic material present in our soil, and they are rich there, and a rich organic horizon. There could be a lot of temperature changes in grassland. So we have periodic fires. Why? Because mainly because grasslands are all filled with grass. So if they are too hot temperature, some leads to fire. So of course, grasses are prone to fire. Okay, and we have also presence of animals, from smaller animals to present of some uh, presence of some uh, you know, carnivorous, or we call them predatory animals, like the prairie dogs. So prairie dogs, they are found on these areas of grassland, and they are actually hunting for their food. So they're looking for some smaller animals, like squirrels, rodents, rabbits, and some other smaller mammals present on grassland. Next is chaparral. So chaparral are also called Mediterranean climate, or we simply call them a climate when there's temperature like mild to moist winter, and of course hot dry summers. This one for chaparral, it is also uh, parang there will be frequent fires on this chaparral because of the temperature. So if it's summer season, it's very hot and very dry. Okay, for chaparral, of course, the vegetation are very no. Uh, there are a lot of vegetation present in chaparral, like evergreen shrubs, and there are also lush green growing on these areas of the chaparral. So animals present on chaparral, ito yung mga mule deer, yeah, we have the chipmunks, and some species of birds. If you're going to study about different types of birds, of course, most birds rely on trees for their home. So they stay on trees, and you can see naman chaparral are also rich in vegetation and a lot of evergreen or evergreens. Yeah. Next, we have desert. Desert, of course, this biome is very no, temperate. Yeah, it's a desert because the temperature really changes. Now, desert are not all hot season, or yeah, because according to some of our researches, you see in desert, if it's daytime, deserts are too hot, very hot, very hot temperature in daytime. But if it's nighttime, or let's say uh, nighttime, the temperature varies from a hot season later to a very cold season. These are, of course, we can find on desert. Now, deserts soils low in nutrients. Why? Because there are present of high salts in this land. So if there are high salts, of course, there could be less vegetation, like only some other or uh, uh, some type of vegetation that actually they can survive the very hot season on deserts, like the cactuses, and of course we have the sagebrush. For the sagebrush and the cactus, they have pouches of water, or called the containers of water in their bodies of their plants, or of these different types of plants. So during nighttime they collect water, and during daytime they use that for survival. Okay, so they have little. water storage in their body so they can survive the very hot daytime in desert. Okay. For animals, of course, there are present of smaller animals. Some of them are also adjusting to hot temperature. And of course, we can see naman some of the bodies of animals who actually adjust to this type of vegetation like desert. Next, we have savanna. Savanna, or we simply call it tropical grassland. So these are tropical. Kasi namin tropical, we're talking about uh, temperature changes. It also varies from hot season to a little cold during nighttime or early in the morning. So these are tropical grassland, and there are a lot of trees scattered on grassland. Okay, and yeah, so there's also the nutrients or the soil or low nutrient due to leaching. Sinabing leaching, we're talking about a very hot season or what happens to the soil. They leach or they actually they don't they loses their uh, organic material in the soil. That's where there are less present of nutrients. So what are animals found on savannas? Dami. We have a lot of animals found on savannas. We have hoofed animals. So these are the different types of herds. We have the large grazing herds from deer to maybe bull or wildebeest. These are present in savannas. And of course, if there are this type of animals, there are also large predators who rely on them, like lions and hyenas. And lions, they have their food. They just don't attack. Uh, they don't just don't attack their prey. They're actually thinking of what they do. After they attack in, we call them they attack in groups. So they attack their prey. Later, when they are all done, when they kill their prey and eat some of the flesh, here comes now the hyenas. Hyenas are actually getting or eating the remains of uh, food of these lions. These are the hyenas. Also, there are also present of some wild dogs in savannas. And, yeah, for the vegetation, there's a lot of different types of grasses and cashew trees and different types of shrubs present in savanna. And of course, they have fire adaptive characteristics. So these are present in our savanna. Next is tropical rainforest. For tropical rainforest, so we have a very rich in species for this tropical rainforest. So they have a lush green. The temperature is okay with warm climate and of course moist throughout the year. And according to this one, it's a very productive biome. There's a lot of presence of animals, trees, vegetation here in this tropical rainforest. So yeah, so nutrients tied up in vegetation, not in soil. So there's a lot of vegetation there. So vegetations, we're talking about three distinct canopy layers. When we talk about canopy, we have the what are the different types of canopy? We have the closed canopy, open canopy, and we have another one. For closed canopy, these are trees with a lot of shades. Yeah, let's say closed canopy. They cover because of their uh, big type of tree. They cover mostly the shades under them. So and also we have the closed canopy. Yeah, that's the closed canopy. The open canopy are the example of these are example of parang tall trees with their less just shade. So these are the closed canopy and open canopies. Animals present in tropical rainforest, a lot, most abundant insect. Of course, we have reptiles and amphibians. So we're talking about insects from the smaller ants to a flying insects. They're all found on this tropical rainforest. Also reptiles, from the smallest to the biggest reptile. And we have also amphibians who stays on water and also stays on land. So those are considered reptiles. Next, we're done with the terrestrial biome. Now let's move to aquatic ecosystem. This is the last part of our discussion. For our topic in science, technology, and society, we have terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. So let's talk about aquatic ecosystem for a few minutes. We have two fundamental division of aquatic ecosystem. We have the freshwater, and of course we have the saltwater. If we're going to talk about freshwater, these are I have a lot of example of freshwater ecosystem. Later I will discuss it. And of course we have the salt water. Salt water, we're talking about marine, sea, or ocean. These are the salt water ecosystem. So let's talk about aquatic ecosystem, also affected by, of course, the dissolved oxygen level. We have light penetration. So when as the water goes deeper, the light penetration becomes lesser and lesser. We also have the pH of water from normal pH to high saline water, pH, and basic water. And of course, we have presence or absence of currents. Kasi having currents is our movement in the water, mainly because of oxygen or wind that affects currents or movement in the water. So we have three main ecological categories of organisms present on aquatic ecosystem. We have plankton and nekton, and of course we have the benthos. Kasi having plankton, we're talking about free-floating animals or present on aquatic ecosystem. What are example of free-floating animals? These are the zooplankton, and of course we have the phytoplanktons. Zooplanktons are yung animal-like plankton. You know? They surface or they stays on the water, on the surface. And of course, we have the phytoplankton. These are the different types of plant-like, or some of them are small microscopic organisms. These are the planktons. These are considered free-floating. We also have the nekton. So these are the strong swimming animals present on aquatic ecosystem. We're talking about nekton or strong swimming animals. Of course, these are the variety of different fishes, or not only fishes, we also have the let's say the squid or some crustaceans, also some form of annelids. We call them a little like worms under the water, or they are also, some of them are free swimming, and of course they stays on the areas of aquatic ecosystem. And of course we have the benthos type of organism. If we're going to talk about benthos, these are the bottom dwelling animals. So well, these are animals who stays at the bottom of the water. However, the depth of the water, we also have presence of benthos animals living in there. Okay, let's talk about freshwater ecosystem. This is part of aquatic ecosystem. So what are example of freshwater ecosystem? These are the rivers and streams. We have also lakes and ponds. We have marshes and swamps. We also have, no? So these are example of freshwater. Because having freshwater, there are less salt present on freshwater ecosystem compared to, let's say, marine or seawater ecosystem. So for freshwater ecosystem, it represents 2% of Earth's surface. So rivers and streams, lakes and ponds, marshes and swamps, wherever big they are, they only represents 2% of Earth's surface. Okay, and yeah, so let's talk about rivers and streams. If we're going to talk about rivers and streams, of course, it starts from the higher level down to the lower level. So it changes greatly from headwater. Headwater means where it all starts, started, let's say from the high Alps or high mountain. When they run off to a lower level, we call that, of course, rivers and streams. From the headwater down to the mouth area of the water, we have these rivers and streams. For headwaters, it's shallow, of course, cold or cool, and swiftly flowing, and they have high oxygen. So they are mid-lake part. You can find them on, let's say, high places on the mountain. So here in our presentation, if you can see on the picture, the headwater streams there, they flow from the high part of the mountain to going down rapidly to the areas of the mouth of the water. So they can be running off like waterfalls or like strongly currents going down to from the mountain. So as they go towards that area, they move to a smaller, uh, what is tributaries like river, and they actually adds to the flow. So when some of these small headwaters, when they actually combining, they become bigger flow of rivers and streams. And later they move to the floodplain where there's relatively flat area and on either side of the river that is subject to flooding. So of course, when there's a lot of water from headwater streams, and they all combine, they go to floodplain, and this is of course subject to flooding. And later, as the river's course levels out, the river flows, they, they move very slowly, and the wind affects them from side to side, and we call them meanders. So these are forming bends called meanders. So meanders are, some of them are in a zigzag area. Some of them they branch out from one floodplain or one another form, another uh, bodies of water. So these are all winters. Now, later on that area of nearest the ocean, they will pass through, of course, we call them estuary. So these are the estuaries are actually the combination of, oh no, estuary is an area where fresh water meets salt water. So that's what we call it, the estuary. Okay. Now let's move to lakes and ponds. So these are bodies of water or fresh water that does not flow. Kaya nga they're called stagnant water or they're not free flowing water. We call them lakes and ponds. In the Philippines, we have a lot of lakes and ponds. Here in our area, in Cavite and somewhere in Batangas, we have, we have Manila Dibay, and we also have the somewhere in Taal. We have the lakes there, and of course, we have this example of ponds. So we're talking about lakes and ponds. We also have three zones. We have the littoral zones, we have the limnetic zone, and we have the profundal zone. So these are example of zone present on lakes and ponds. Okay, let's talk about these different types of zone. Okay, so lakes and ponds, these are the different types of zone. First is the littoral zone. These are the shallow water area along the shore. So if you can see at the picture, there's an area there, we call it littoral zone, from the shoreline down to a depth of probably around less than 20, 30 meters deep. We call it the littoral zone. So you can see if it's littoral zone, you can also see some animals who stays on shallow water, like some fishes and some shrubs and some other forms of crustacean. They can also be found on littoral zone. Next, we have the limnetic zone or limnetic zone. These are areas of the lake when there's open water. So from the littoral zone down to the open water, we call it the limnetic zone. So here in the picture, from the littoral zone there down to the wide open water, we call that limnetic zone. Next to limnetic zone, of course, is the last form of zonation in on lakes and ponds. We have the profundal zone. These are areas where you can see or found on deep lakes. So beneath the limnetic zone, of course, are deep lakes. So you can see there, these are the deeper area of the lakes and ponds called the profundal zone. So let's talk about marshes and swamps. So these are also present. These are also example of freshwater habitation or biome, where you can see there are shallow water, fresh water covers the area of these marshes and swamp at least part of the year, but not the whole year round. Characteristics of soil, waterlogged, and of course we have anaerobic for periods of time. We also have vegetations who are tolerant in water, so they can survive the presence of water. So these are vegetation who can survive the presence of water in this surrounding. Next, this is what I talked a while ago. We have the estuary. Estuary where fresh water from rivers, streams, and some bodies of water, which is fresh water, to meet the salt water. So these are S3, we call it S3, fresh water and salt water mix. So where fresh water meets the salt water of the ocean or the sea, we call they will pass to S3s. So S3s, they have a highly variable environment. They have the temperature also changes. The salinity, it's not too saline and not too salty. And of course, we have the penetration of light here in our estuary. So this in our picture, we can see some example of estuary. We have the Gulf of Mexico. No? So this is the Gulf of Mexico. So some estuary present in these states in the U.S. So when they go from, when they run off from water, from headwater, from the mountains, and they run off to rivers and streams. Later, they meet the ocean floor. We call that estuary. Okay. Next, we have the marine ecosystem. Wait up. Hello, Ami. Hello. Nagre-record ako ng discussion ko. Isa. Anong nasa doon, ha? Ano na lang, mga 10 minutes na lang tapos na ako. Sige. Saglit na. Tatawag na lang ako pag nandyan ako. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye. I'm sorry. Okay. Where are we now? Okay, S3. All right, we're done with the marine ecosystem. Where did we end? All right. Now we are in marine ecosystem. So for marine ecosystem, it is subdivided into different zones. We have the intertidal zone, we have the benthic zone, we have the pelagic environment, or of course we have the Neretic province and the oceanic province. You can see in our presentation, in our picture, here we have the intertidal zones. So intertidal zones are zones where you can find in between tides. So we call that intertidal zone. I will discuss later, one by one, from intertidal zone down to the oceanic province of the pelagic area. Now here, we have the intertidal zones here on the shore lines. And later, we will discuss about continental shelf, continental slope, from abyssal plain down to the deep part of the marine ecosystem. We have the hadal zone, and of course, we have the abyssal zone. Okay. Next, we have benthic zone. So for the benthic zone, intertidal zone first. So these are areas of shorelines between low and high tides. So these are intertidal zone. Kaya the word intertidal means in between tides. So you can see in our picture, we have different types of zones or tide zones here. We have the supratidal zone. We can see some animals like anemones, tube worm, hermit crabs. They stay on areas where there less water or sea. We have the supratidal zone. Next, we have the intertidal zone. For the supratidal zone, these are the splash zone. So when water splash to it, some creates tide pools. And we have this area where animals, of course, stays there for habitation. We have also the intertidal zone. We have the level of the lowest tide, so we can see some animals there. We have the barnacles, we have the rock barnacles, we have the mussels here, we have the limpets, we have the barnacles, we have the crabs, algae, oysters, and some brown and some algae present in intertidal zone. And of course, beneath or beyond the intertidal zone is the subtidal zone. Here for subtidal zone, you can see some bigger algae, brown algae. We also have presence of mussels. We have also presence of some stars or sea stars, basket starfishes. We also have sea urchin and some spider crabs and some crustaceans present on subtidal zone. Next is the Benthic zone. From the intertidal zone, next layer or next zone is the benthic zone. So benthic zone is the ocean floor extending from the tidal zone to the deep sea trenches. So here we have also different types of zones. We have the bathyal zone, we have the abyssal zone. Of course, the deeper part of the ocean is the hadal zone. So for bathyal zone, this reaches from 200 meters down to a depth of 4,000 meters below. So we have bathyal zone. So most large fishes stays on bathyal zone, like sharks and some carnivorous type of fishes. And not only fishes, we also have present of mammals who are actually living on bathyal zone. Next is the abyss or the abyssal zone from 4,000 meters to a depth of 6,000 meters. So if you're talking about meters here, if it's 1,000 meter, that is equivalent to 1 kilometer. So abyssal zone is from 4 kilometers deep down to 6 kilometers deep. We call that 4,000 meters down to 6,000 meters in the depth uh, below the sea water or the sea. Next is the hadal zone from 6,000 down to the deepest part of the of the of the of the sea. So for our information, the deepest part of the sea, we call that trenches or somewhere found on the Hadal Zone. The deepest trench is, we call it the Marianas Trench. Marianas Trench is about 11 kilometers deep. So that's 11,000 meters deep. So from the level of the water, which is in the seawater, down 11 kilometers down there, that's the deepest area of the water. We call that the Marianas Trench, and that's somewhere found on the Hadal zone of the Benthic area. Next, what are the communities found on this different types of uh, depth of water? We have seagrasses. So we have seagrass beds. So you can see there, they form like ornamentals under the water, but actually they are seagrasses. They are found present in at a depth of 10 meters. They provide food and habitat for or provide food and habitat to ecosystem. Like they also give food to some fishes and habitation, some animals who rely on them for protection and shelter. Those are the seagrasses. We also have the kelp forest. We're talking about forest, it's like a forest, but it's under the water. So we have different types of kelp, from the smaller kelp down to the bigger or biggest kelp. They are found on kelp forest. So these are probably found 60 meters down there, or some of them can be as tall as 60 meters. Long brown algae. The long brown algae actually are the largest, large type of kelp found on kelp forests under the water. And they also found on rocky shores. Diversity of different kelps, of course, depends on the depth of the water. We also have the coral reefs. Coral reefs, these are all present on most, some in all bodies of fresh water. No, no, salt water. So these are also, they form in colonies of millions of tiny corals. Actually, corals are not rocks. They are not abiotic. These are considered biotic factor or biotic animals. They are live animals present on coral reefs. So they are found on shallow water. Some of them are also found under beneath the depth of the water. And these are most diverse in all marine environments. Next, we have the productive benthic communities. So these are example of seagrasses. So these are the seagrasses here. Of course, some of the animals rely on them for food, shelter, protection, and of course, for reproduction and some different form of other characteristics of these animals. Also, we have the right on here on the right picture, we have the forest, kelp forest. So these are the large kelps present in benthic areas of the seafloor. So these are the large cap. They become a forest because they are actually growing in colonies or groups of different forests. Now let's talk about coral reefs. So these are types of coral reefs. You have the fringing reef, we have the atoll, and of course we have the barrier reef. For fringing reef, these are actually directly attached to the continent. Yeah, here are the fringing reef. So here we have the fringing reefs here. If it's high tide, they are all covered with water. If it's low tide, the reefs or some of the coral reefs are exposed because of the low tides in the water. You also have the atoll. Atoll become patches reefs here. Like it becomes a lagoon. If there's high or low water tides in the water, it forms a lagoon or a little pool somewhere on uh, bodies of sea water. And of course, we have the barrier reef. It forms a barrier from this area of the lagoon down to the seawater or the sea floor. It form a barrier, and these are all with presence of coral reefs here. Next, we have last among our top of our discussion are human disturbances. Of course, human are one of the factor that disturb or damage um, some of our environment or habitation in the water. So what are human impact on coral reefs? Of course, we have sedimentation. There are some of them, they cut them, and they destroy them. When they also do overfishing, they get a lot of fish. And of course, some of the human, they do coral bleaching. They bleach the corals. If they do that, they die. And of course, fish who rely on coral reefs for shelter and for habitation, they also move away, or some of them they also die. Mining of corals as building materials. So some people they get corals from the water, from the sea, and then they collect them, and then some of them they also sell to some people or some trades there. And of course, run of pollution. So people, human, we because of a lot of pollution, like our water become polluted because of human doing. So they run off from our houses, from our uh, industries, and when we have no treatment facility for our sewages, they run off from our household to our canals to our rivers to our streams they go to the water and to the sea, and of course, if it's polluted, they also pollute our ocean or our seas. Okay? So what are pelagic environment? All of the ocean waters. We have two main divisions. We have the Neretic province, and of course, we have the oceanic province. For Neretic province, again, these are from the continental shelf, from from the shore down to as depth as 200 meters, and then later, of course, from Neretic province to oceanic province. For oceanic province, these are from the 200 meters down or uh, deeper. So these are the two main division of our pelagic environment. So most organisms are dependent on marine snow, show, and of course, organisms are filter feeders, scavengers, and predators. You can see naman we have a lot of different types of animals who are present on this oceanic province. Some of them are filter feeders, some of them are scavengers. They eat that part of decaying part of some animals or some other plants on the water. And of course, some of them are also predators. They hunt their food, they kill them, and they eat them. Okay, so these are example of human impacts on the ocean. Actually, this is my last slide. Of course, we have pollution from our agriculture, from our farms when they spill the pesticides, and they pollute the water. And of course, when they run off from the areas, the rivers, it also pollutes the ocean floor because of this runoff of pollution. We also have the invasive species. Invasive species, of course, they can do good things, and of course, they can also bad. And they can also result to bad things in the ocean. So some invasive species they can be used up as to reproduce. So they reproduce a lot of different species, And for some invasive species, they also eat and destroy the original species present on this environment. So that's the negative results of invasive species. Next, we have the overfishing, of course. When we talk about overfishing, yeah, no? They get as much as they can from the smallest and to the biggest. And of course, if it's overfishing, what happens to our availability of fish? They deplete or they actually decrease in number. Of course, we have the bycatch, example, fishermen unintentionally kill dolphins, sea turtles, and of course, seabirds. That's what we call bycatch. For aquaculture, yeah, they produce waste and later pollute the ocean. And point source pollution from passenger cruises, sewages, some showers and sink water, they run off to they are moved to they are actually moved to the ocean floor, they pollute our ocean. And of course, for coastal development, yeah, the developers destroys important coastal habitat and such as salt water or salt marshes and of course mangrove swamps. And destruction of habitat, I don't know, for dynamite fishing, they kill them and then they destroy their habitat. And of course, for climate change. Climate change definitely affect our ocean. Okay, so this that ends my presentation today, and may this presentation serve its purpose as to educate our students in Science Technology Society. And thank you for your time. And this has been your uh, teacher, Lester Harris Market.